Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bourbon Note. I'm Greg.
I'm Ben.
And today we're drinking bourbon. All right, Ben. You said there's an episode of Friends about this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not about this.
Well, what's the story?
Okay, so
Makes reference.
Before we get into that, this is Basil Hayden's.
This is Basil Hayden's.
Jim Beam product, 80 proof. Everybody's heard of Basil Hayden's. It's kind of one of those, you know, it looks fancy on the shelf. I think I saw in a thing, I think it was a Fred Minnick video or something like that. If it's Fred Minnick, they usually take him at his word. I think he had looked up some stats on, he did a list of the most gifted whiskeys, and this was like the number one. I don't know if it was whiskeys or bourbons, but
I've been gifted 2 bourbons in my life. Mm-hmm. This is one of the 2.
Yeah, so if you don't know much about bourbon and you just want to buy a bottle, this looks fancy, it's a little expensive. Yeah, why not buy this one? The Friends thing, so before we started taping this, we were talking about, it's like, I wonder what the actual age of this is, and I said the only information that I have on that is there's an episode of Friends from a while ago that I've only seen once, where the situation is Chandler, his coworkers are trying to bribe him for some reason, I can't remember what it was, and the one guy's like, well, hey, how about we go do this, and we go do this, and the one guy's like, well, how about we light up some cigars and sip on some 8-year Basil Hayden's, and his response was, I don't know what that is, but it sounds fancy. So I always assumed 8-year.
Turns out it's true up until the year 2014.
Yeah.
It lost its age statement like a lot of bourbons. It's probably well aged. It's not 4 years in a day, but it's probably slipped below the 8.
Yeah, and so as we get into this, this bottle has been sitting on my shelf for a while and it's pretty low, so
it's time to say
It's time
goodbye.
to just drink it down. I don't really go to this one very often, to be honest, because and here's the thing, I like having it on my shelf. There's not a whiskey in the world I don't want to have on my shelf. But I just don't go to it terribly often because this one, to me, is a little bit more of, no, it's price-wise it's not, but how it drinks is a little more of an entry level. You know, it would serve as a great entry level bourbon just because it's that low 80 proof.
I'm helping you out. I accidentally poured a lot.
That's just fine. And I'll probably have another bottle of this at some point.
So I used to own this bottle, not this one, but and I finished it quite a while ago. So I've not had a Basil Hayden in 3 years, let's say.
Really?
Yeah. So
wow.
I'm kind of looking forward to it because my opinion then, like my opinion about a lot of things in life has changed. And I really like a lot of the other Beam products. And I think this is gonna compare interestingly against Old Grandad, which we've done a review of recently.
Same mash bill. Okay, so now you brought that up. So on Old Grandad, on the label, there's a guy, Old Grandad, that is Basil Hayden. Did you know that?
I did.
You probably knew that.
Yeah, I did.
Did you know that? So anyway, yeah, so these are actually the same mash bill. This is the 114. This is just the closest Old Grandad I have.
Yep.
So yeah, Old Grandad is Basil Hayden. They're both from Jim Beam. This is part of their small batch, their original like 4 small batch whiskeys. It was Basil Hayden's, Knob Creek, Baker's, and Booker's.
Correct.
They still have all of those.
They do. Yep.
But those are the original small batch. I don't know if they've added anything that they consider small batch. That
sounds like that may be it.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. There's probably something, but so anyway, the beef I have with this, because I do have a little bit of a thing about Basil Hayden's.
Do you want to talk about that before or after you taste it?
Let's get into the tasting.
It's a really big pour for a tasting. This is my evening.
That's a flat out drinking pour.
It is. So we'll end the video before I get done with this.
I'm getting a little more rye on this than I remembered. It is a high rye, but I always remember it's very subdued and kind of, this is one of those ones that's considered very smooth.
See, my impression from several years ago was it was pretty spicy, and I assumed that was the rye spice, And so it was my favorite. So I ended up doing a lot of mixed drinks with this to kill the bottle.
And I said I would consider this an entry level, and I normally wouldn't recommend a high rye one for an entry level, but this one I feel like is just
at 80 proof.
80 proof, yeah, it's
probably fairly safe.
Yeah. All right, let's give her a taste here.
I get a citrusy orange note.
Really? I'm not getting that.
I get a really dry note. Like
definitely getting the dry.
It almost like dries
so much,
your tongue out. Like it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's not alcohol evaporating.
It's not high proof.
There's some traditional like peanut shell note that comes from this distillery, which is good. The sweetness is really subdued. There's some caramel notes and some vanilla, but there's
there's not as much sweetness there as I would have thought. Now, being a high rye, there's also not as much of that rye punch to it. Now, it is 80 proof, and that's a contributing factor to that. But so what I was going to say before, the slight beef that I have with Basil Hayden's, it's not that it's not a good bourbon. It's not that I dislike it or wouldn't recommend it. Now, most people who get further into drinking bourbon start to appreciate a little higher proof stuff, and then this kind of falls off the, off the radar. I think most people that regularly drink, that collect bourbon in like a big variety, probably don't go for this as their every night pour.
And why is that?
Well, it's very low proof. It's the bottom level proof, and this is one of those ones that is smooth because it's too watered down. Now, it used to carry the 8-year age statement, which helps, but now they've cut that down to nobody knows what it is. Maybe it's 7 years, maybe it's 7.5. Maybe a lot of this actually is 8, but they couldn't guarantee it'd be, so they can't put on the label. Yep. The problem I have is that it's just well overpriced.
But it's wearing a tuxedo.
That's the thing. I mean, it's a fancy looking bottle. It's brilliant marketing.
Yep, I agree.
But this is $45, sometimes $50 at local stuff. I know you can get it for cheaper than that, $40, maybe upper 30s, but that's about as low as it goes around here in Minnesota anyway. Yeah. So on an average of $45,
there's a few other bourbons that you have that, quite honestly, are better.
There's a ton of other bourbons that I have that are $20 that are better.
I agree.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't want this on my shelf, because as a bourbon collector, I want everything on my shelf. And this is a good one when people come over and they want to experiment with bourbon a little bit, they haven't had a whole lot, or they're just interested in it. I would definitely pour this for them.
And to that end, the reason I actually just bought a bottle of this, when did I go? Yesterday? Is because I want to do a flight of the Old Grandad that I just bought, an Old Grandad, a Basil Hayden, a Knob Creek. I have a Booker's as well that I want to include, just to see the progression of the proof on similar bourbons from the same company. To see.
Well, this and the Old Grandad will definitely, because they're the same mash bill.
Right.
And then Booker's and Knob Creek probably be the same mash bill.
Old Tub in there as well.
Yeah. I feel like this is going to get its ass kicked.
Well,
it struggles at that 80 proof point.
It's entry level for the proof point.
Yeah.
And then when you put in the price, it's overpriced.
Yeah, it's an entry level bourbon that's dressed up to be a fancy bourbon, and it just isn't.
It isn't.
But it's not that it's in it. Again, it's not that it tastes bad or that it's a bad. It
actually is a really good bourbon.
It tastes good, but it's just so. Like at this point in my experience of I just like a little more proof.
Yeah.
But that being said, there's like Evan Williams single barrel is 86 proof. That's not much different, and I'll sip on that all day long. Yeah, and love it. So
we just did a review where we compared two bourbons that were only 4 proof points apart. Yeah. Everything else about them was the same, and that was noticeable.
Yeah.
Honestly, if they push this up to 90.
Yeah. You don't have to go crazy with it. I don't need this at cask strength or anything like that. But just to have what is kind of one of their fancier bourbons at such a low proof, the bottom line proof you can go to and still legally call it a bourbon.
Yeah. It's a good mash bill that's been too watered down.
Yeah. I think you go Old Grandad Bonded.
That's
as opposed to this.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely.
You know,
I mean,
not for a beginner.
Right.
Again, this is great for a beginner to, you know, experiment a little bit with, but an Old Grandad Bonded is $22 for a liter. You know?
An Old Tub is $22 or so. And that's a bonded.
So it's not that I'm not a fan of this, it's just it's not something that I would go out of my way for. Like if somebody gave me this bottle as a gift,
Awesome.
Yeah, I would love that because I like to have it on the shelf. At the same time, I have a hard time going out and buying a new bottle.
Yeah.
Because there's just, for that price, there's so many other things out there that I personally want to drink as opposed to this. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I don't recommend it, it's not that I don't like it, but it's not something that I really, I guess, it's not a daily pour for me, or even a special occasion pour for that matter, you know?
Yep, unfortunately there's too many bourbons that are taking the place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good, but...
You know, that's the best way to describe it. For the price, there's so many other ones out there that punch higher than this, and that aren't even that much higher in proof. You know,
and
80 versus
cheaper.
86, with a little bit of age on it.
Yeah, that Old Forester 86 proof 5-year, you know, was awesome. And punched way above its weight.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the only thing. If they take this fancy label off and drop $15 off of the price of this, sure. And maybe add 6 proof points.
6 proof points, yeah.
But
7, be unique.
Yeah. That being said, that doesn't mean this wouldn't make a good gift to somebody, but if they're a very experienced bourbon drinker, you can get them something way cheaper that's gonna beat this one all day long.
I agree.
So, anyway, this has been Basil Hayden's on the Bourbon Note. I'm Ben.
I'm Greg. Thanks for watching. Cheers.